if I took a chance. It's always hard at first glance. I don't wanna, but I know I gotta do it. The truth is hard to swallow. I think I'll chew it.
A few years ago, I started writing a fictitious story based on my time as an educator. It is called Taught, and the story was partially inspired out of anger and frustration fueled by burnout. Okay, actually, it was more than partially inspired by anger and frustration. But Taught has also become a vehicle for me to tell what I thought at the time, and in some ways continue to think, was and is the real story of teaching. I now realize that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but there are some pieces of Taught that resonated with many educators. This podcast is an extension of that story, and I, a former teacher, will interview other educators asking them to share how they really feel about the current state of education. Why are so many teachers burn out? Why are so many, like me, leaving the field? We likely won't solve any problems or come up with any solutions, but we can create a community of voices that maybe begin the conversation around how educators can take back teaching. I'm Melissa LaFleur. Welcome to Taught, the podcast.
I like to be educated, but I'm so frustrated.
Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Joel Felsenstein, a passionate advocate for inclusive education and a gifted musician. Joel's deep-rooted connection to the world of education stems from a long line of family members who have dedicated their lives to teaching. As a seasoned music educator himself, Joel brings firsthand experience to the table. His unique perspective as a neurodivergent individual offers valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities within the English education system. Known for his inspiring motto, "Different, not less," Joel is committed to creating a more compassionate and inclusive world. As the founder and CEO of Rockstar X, he empowers uniquely talented individuals to reach their full potential. His work has even been recognized by Forbes, highlighting his entrepreneurial journey on the neurodivergent spectrum. In today's episode, we'll delve into Joel's experiences within the state education system and explore practical ways to recognize and nurture diverse talents. Join us as we learn how to embrace difference and create a future where everyone can thrive. Joel, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Glad to be here. And yes, without the sound effects.
So I'm going to add in for our listeners that I shared with you that I have a cold today. So I sound a bit like, in the United States, we say you have a frog in your throat. That's exactly what it sounds like. So forgive listeners, forgive any coughing or snorting or anything that goes on my side. So it's all me. That's not Joel doing that. All right. So Joel, this podcast is about teacher burnout. And you have several family members in the education system in England. Let's start there. Are your friends and family in education experiencing burnout? And can you tell us a bit about their experience?
Well, my family have sort of bowed out of the full-time education now. Not for because they wanted to. They were forced out. But if my father did experience burnout, he hid it extremely well because he's that kind of person that doesn't show his feelings, rarely gets angry, and hardly raises his voice. So if he was suffering from burnout, none of us would have known.
So do you think that he would have stayed with education if he had not been forced out?
Oh yeah, he would have stayed at the school which effectively he and my entire family helped build. Um, Not donate. We were heavily involved from the beginning in the school. Um, and yeah, I mean, he would have stayed there and he would have stayed there until his retirement, which he hadn't even done yet. So now he has to do his own stuff, consulting, inspecting, all that stuff. And
So, one of the things you had mentioned when we had our pre interview conversation is that you feel like at this point in time, there's too much government involvement within the education system.
yes, there is a bit too much involvement, interference, I think would be the appropriate word here, from government bodies, because they want to almost dictate what the education sector and anyone else does in their lives, and taking away all sorts of freedom and methods that
So, I
not.
had another guest on the podcast named Sam, and Sam is also from England. He was a teacher, and he said that kind of what you're alluding to, that the restrictions that are being placed on educators by the government actually makes it very challenging not to teach to a test, that there's not a lot of room for teachers to teach to their passions.
Well, there's not really any room for that to happen. I think Sam must have been putting it very politely. Uh, but I don't think there is anything. I don't think the governments rather um do want uh passion to enter, well, not just teaching, I suppose, any line of work really, because once you allow passion and enjoyment, and that leads to freedom and of thought and all that stuff, and then the government in their mind would lose all control of us. um
And this is kind of a passion for you, right? That everyone gets
yes.
to kind of seek out their passion and follow it. Yeah. So, do you think we had talked also? Do you think that this is the driving force for burnout amongst educators because they are just so restricted?
I say burnout, but I would probably more likely say fed up with the
Mhm.
system, and that's why you get so many teachers leaving the profession.
Yeah, we're experiencing the same thing in the United States where we're just having we call it an exodus of teachers that are leaving the field. And I don't know if this is the same in England, but we're having fewer students go to school to become teachers.
I think that might be the same over here as well. I haven't really talked to my dad about the teaching profession since he left. I thought that might be a bit insensitive.
How long ago did he leave?
Oh, a whole bunch of them, 20 of them, and he was one of the 20 that got given their marching orders in 2019.
Wow. That was right before the pandemic, too.
That was no, sorry, no, 2021, 22, because the main reason we suspect the reason is it's always to do with money, but we suspect that the governors of the school they built a new building on the site of the school. That building then caught fire from an electrical fault, so they effectively burnt through quite a few million pounds. And the school is an very old building anyway. It's a listed building, so it's already a project fix up, which they can't put in anymore to um really put it right. Because it will cost them over 6.5, 7 million.
Yeah.
So
So
they don't have the money to hire teachers or keep the good ones. They have the money to hire lower standard ones,
mhm.
but the good ones they had, including my dad, they had to let go.
So this is something we also see in the United States is that teachers of a certain age, and I would be this age, are not as hireable because the more experience we have and the more education we have, the more they tend to have to pay us. And
Right.
it's much easier to pay somebody a lower
Yeah.
salary.
Yeah.
But then this creates issues within the classroom, mainly because teaching has always been a profession, much like music, where you kind of go through an apprenticeship. We don't call it that, we call it student teaching, but you need master teachers, just like you need master musicians to show you the techniques that are tried and true and to also give you feedback. And so, what we're finding in the United States is that we are having fewer of those master teachers that can actually mentor the ones who need the mentoring.
I was having a conversation with someone a few months ago now. I don't know if I can say this on your podcast, but
We can
we
edit anything out, but go for it.
we both agreed that the only thing that school as a student prepares you for is prison.
It does.
It doesn't teach you anything about life.
Well, I would say that at least in the US, it also prepares you to work in factories.
Yeah,
However, most factories are becoming automated. So
yeah,
that's not a good model for us anymore. But yes, have
yeah.
you heard of the what's it? The education to prison pipeline? Have you heard of this
No, not,
theory?
no, not yet, but I'm sure it's extremely accurate.
I will send you a link about that because there is a body of evidence that particularly how we treat students
Yeah.
um, from a certain age is and their demographics that we treat differently. Sometimes that's based on race, sometimes it's based on ability, sometimes it's based on gender. That all of these set a fairly large group of people up to be very successful in the prison setting. So you're onto something there, you and your friend.
Yeah, it's quite
So
sad because you're not actually taught in school on how to make a living. You're taught how to make someone else's dreams come true, essentially, not yours.
yeah, you're taught how to behave and follow orders,
Yeah.
and sit in a seat quietly. Yeah. So, your experience as an educator is from the perspective of someone who gives music lessons. And some may say that this area of education is more immune to what we call burnout because you have some ability to control your student population and the hours that you work. Do you think this is true, or is this also an area where people who are teaching music lessons are becoming frustrated and feeling the burn of burnout?
Well, I think if you're teaching music lessons in particularly schools, you're not just te you're not you can't control who you're teaching.
That is true. That is true.
So whether you get any teaching done or whether you're just shouting yourself hoarse for the class to quiet down and listen. By the time that happens, the lesson's over and you taught nothing. Um, is I don't agree with that music teachers are immune to burnout.
I think you make a really good point. My daughter's fiance is a band director. And as a musician, when you have multiple people that you're teaching, that's quite a task.
Yes, but also with the red tape surrounding education, in schools you have to teach, even in music, you can't just teach practical stuff. And you
Yeah.
can't teach your own books. You have to teach. I don't know what it is in the US or Portugal, but you have to teach the examination approved board of Trinity. Um, you have to teach theory and practical.
Mhm.
Now, coming from a student's point of view, you've lost me at the word theory because you're teaching them all stuff from classical music right up to present day Britpop and all that stuff, and they're thinking, well, what's this got to do with what I want to play?
You're right, especially younger students, because for them to go in and learn anything, they're wanting to know how it applies to them and what they can do with that information.
For me, it's not actually for most bands and stuff, and even orchestras. I don't know if it's so much the case, but no one gives a crap what an A4 piece of paper says you can do.
Hmm.
They only care what you actually can do.
Yep. I think that's going to get us into and I know you have a lot to say about this because, so let me take us back I'm going to take us back to your school experience. And so, what we have discovered throughout the podcast is that burnout has some very noticeable things. When you're with someone who's burnout, you can tell. Those people oftentimes are very negative. Um, they tend to be apathetic. Um, they're very tired, not very passionate. So would you say during your experience as a student in the state system, you encountered educators that were burned out? And what
I
was the
went, I went,
impact?
I went through four schools
Wow. Tell us about that.
because none of which was equipped to with a proper education unit for people like me. Um, every school in the world is all mainstream, and then you have this little normally you have this little afterthought of a room called the send unit, um, which is useful but useless at the same time because those teachers will get burnt out fairly easily, and you don't actually have any lessons in there in the unit. You have them all in the mainstream, so it's also sort of defeats the purpose anyway. Um, and then you read about, and then of course, mainstream special needs and mainstream. Then you read about bullying, and then bullying leads to suicide and all that stuff. Um, which I guess is a very extreme form of burnout, but
Well, I definitely think students can feel that as well, that they
Oh,
can feel
teachers are
burned
great,
out.
yeah. I mean, that's why you see so many bald teachers. I mean,
There are a lot of bald teachers. You're correct about that.
oh, they turn their hair grey, or they've just ripped it out with sheer frustration.
Yeah, well, I like to think that we do things a little differently in the United States. But you're right, we do mainstream most of our students. Over the years, I had a lot of students who were on the neurodivergent spectrum, that stayed the majority of the time in my class. We call it a resource room. The resource room was really used for those moments when a student couldn't regulate their emotions. Um, and so they could go there and have that opportunity to have some time to kind of get back into a safe space emotionally. However, I do think that all educators need to make accommodations for all students.
Yeah,
In the United States, we have individualized education plans, and we call those IEPs. And my last couple of years teaching, I had a friend say to me, before this is all said and done, every kiddo that comes through the door is going to have an IEP. And ideally, that's kind of what education should look like, right?
yeah,
Because I have different learning needs than other people. So do you. We're not going to get the material the same way. And I feel my personal opinion is that, especially primary school, is to give those foundational building blocks. We're all going to have to learn to add and subtract. We're all going to have to learn how to read. But when
yeah.
you get up into year 5, year 6, year 7, at that point, I really feel like students begin to find their passions and the things that they enjoy. And this sit 45 kids in a room and put a book in front of everyone doesn't work so well for them.
No, I didn't. I don't go. I don't think any kid thinks, why on earth would I need to go to a gigantic library to read a book when we can just listen to audio versions on our phones? And other ways of actually listening, and you can still learn what words are even without reading by listening to them.
That's true.
May not be able to spell them correctly, but you will be able to certainly know what they are.
Well, I think this speaks to kind of what you were saying. If you have a very high aversion to reading, oftentimes as educators, we need to sit down and think about what is the learning objective here. And if a student has those building blocks, if they understand the alphabet, they understand how that works in their language, and they understand that these words put together make meaningful communication happen. And then their preference is to get their information through the auditory process. Those options definitely need to be available to them. And I also would say this goes for writing as well. Over the years, I have found I have a high population of students that had creative genius, but to sit down and actually physically write things out was an arduous task for them. So those things aren't challenging to make accommodations for in our current technological world.
But the only obstacle that stands in that way is the red tape.
Yes. Actually, honestly, it goes back to those damn tests. I mean, I have a friend here and she works tutoring students.
Yep.
I always mess up this test that you have to take in England. Is it the GCSE?
Yes.
Oh, I got it right. And there's a whole portion of that that is handwritten that you have to physically hand write.
Yep.
And there, she said, I don't think there's an accommodation for that, is there? Do they allow students to do that in any other way, or does it have to be handwritten?
Well, they allow students to use a computer with with exception, but the only well, the computer has to be set up by the school to not have internet and stuff like that, and the grammar has to be turned off.
Yeah.
Spell check has to be turned off.
Well, that definitely takes a portion of students out of the equation, right? How do you even get the good marks on that? Wow. However, maybe you went to four different schools, but you yourself have achieved success and you've made it your mission to help other people who are neurodivergent. And I don't think that's your only focus group. I think you want everything to be out there for everyone to attain the same success. So, kind of walk us through that journey for you. School, not a success.
The only thing the school taught me is I have to rip up the entire rule book
That's exciting.
and forget everything that I was taught, and because everything that I was taught was a lie which didn't prepare you for the for life lessons. Nothing really truly prepares you for after school, what's after college. Unless you live it.
Was your college experience different than your other educational experience?
I went to the only special needs college in the entire country.
Wow. And was it easier for you there?
Not really, because I don't really fit into the very special needs, and yet I don't really quite fit into the mainstream. I'm annoyingly staggering, walking like a crab, over two lanes, so to speak. So you've got one. I'm literally walking with with one leg with oncoming traffic coming towards me, and the other leg's going the other way. So I'm sort of effectively. That's not mine. Um, I'm effectively my own category, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a bit annoying when you don't quite fit there and you don't quite fit here. But then again, why would you want to fit anywhere? You're not a bloody cube.
But you know what, Joel? I think that you are creating a pathway and kind of opening this up because you are your own unique person, but there are many people on the neurodivergent spectrum that also school was not a good fit for them, but being in a special needs program also was not a good fit for them.
Yeah.
And so, I've talked a little bit about
Well,
my daughter
it's
with
just they're
you.
an afterthought. It's just they're an afterthought, the special needs program. They're not really a program. It's a room where in short the school puts people which they don't know how to handle.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, that was prison. But
Yeah, well, I think that there are at least in the United States, they lack resources, adequate resources for our people on the neurodivergent spectrum. And a lot of times, what you get is someone who has zero experience working with them, and they don't have the knowledge base to help those, especially children. I mean, young children who are figuring it out, they don't have the knowledge base to help them figure out the pathways that work for them.
and then they complain when they end up on the wrong side of the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't have it both ways. You either don't help them and then you need to expect them to end up going against the system, or you help them and they stay on the right side where you want them to be.
Yeah. Because there's not much forgiveness when they get on the wrong side of the law.
No, it's as if it's our fault for doing something right all through school, but it's also our fault for the crap you made in the first place.
Yes. Yes, and I think this is one of the good things about inclusion because I do think that other children are much better at teaching other children what is socially acceptable and what
Yeah.
is not. I'm going to tell a story. I had a student, I'm not going to say what his name was, but I had him in a year six classroom, sixth grade, and he really enjoyed the girls in the classroom. Like at recess, at lunch, he wanted to be with the girls. And he also wanted to go under the desk and lay his head on their laps. And so I had to discuss with the girls who felt like they were being helpful to him and somewhat treating him like a baby, that this is behavior that's not going to be acceptable. It is not acceptable to go through life finding a pretty girl and laying your head in their lap. I'm sure if it was, more guys would be doing this, but no, we don't allow this. And so those girls were really good. I never had to do anything more than say, don't let him do this. And then they would talk to him about it. They would say, you can't do this, and this is why. Yes, we care about you. It's fine for you to sit with us and we like you, but we don't want you to put your head in our lap. And that was the end of it. I never had to do anything. So I do think that kids oftentimes are very good about doing that. But as you mentioned earlier, kids can also be very good about seeing someone's behavior as something that they have a right to bully them about.
Yeah.
So it's a slippery slope.
Not to mention, if you want a kid to behave, as an adult, we need to practice what we actually preach. If we
That
don't
is also true.
behave, how can we expect the same for our kids or any kid who sees an adult, I don't know, let's say stealing or beating someone up, and they automatically think that's all right, that's acceptable. You're doing it, it must be okay.
Yes, that is true. So you finished college
Yep.
and then were you a musician in college?
Yes, I was quite musical in college, yes.
So when did you start your company and how did all of that unfold?
I could have I could have really picked a better time to do this. I started it inside the second lockdown.
It's a great time to do it.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. It is and it isn't. Um, it isn't because all companies need investment, and then you're starting it in a situation where most people are actually pulling out of that game.
Yeah.
And they still are. And it is if you are born with the silver spoon in your mouth, and you can bankroll your entire company yourself.
100%. I have people ask me all the time how much money I make on the podcast. because they're like, oh, I think I want to do a podcast. I'm like, I make zero money. I actually spend money on my podcast. So if somebody, I'm hoping one day I get paid for doing this, but there are many ways we can
One
get
way you
paid.
get paid in one of the obvious ways is affiliate marketing
Yeah,
and sponsorships.
I agree. But like I said, there's many ways we can get paid. For me, I get to meet people like you. And I
But
think that's pretty good payment. I enjoy talking to people about education.
and
Um,
then all over the world to speak everywhere.
yeah. And you have quite a few followers. So I do want to take a moment and mention that I will link all of your projects in today's show notes so that people know how to get in touch with you, and how to follow you and kind of follow your journey, because your journey was more than so. Let's unpack the company a little bit. Your company is about connecting with other people who are very talented. You have a podcast that you do as well. And it is about connecting people on the neurodivergent spectrum and empowering them to pursue their dreams like you have. Is that correct?
Yes.
So at this point, how many followers do you have?
On LinkedIn, my personal one, or
Either one.
on LinkedIn, this is coming from. I've had LinkedIn since 2009 because I was at the stage of ladies are interesting, so every single social media platform is a dating website. No, it's not. And it was free to sign up, so I was like, okay, fine, let's sign up to another platform. So this is only from 2 years ago. So before I was actively using LinkedIn in the right way, um, I I was only on about 30 or something people that I actually knew of, friends. I thought it was just another Facebook, another Tinder, and uh, um. But now I've got over 5,000 connections and 6,000 followers. I've only been using it for 2 years, properly.
Yeah.
The company itself has got over 1,200 followers on that page.
Yeah, because of course, researched you. And you also have subscribers on your YouTube channel.
Yes.
So, like I said, I'll link all of that.
That
And I've
that may be monetized by next year as well.
very nice. I will send monetizing vibes to you. You've had some very interesting people connect with you, though, via your company as well as via your music. So let's start with your music first. Tell us about some of the people that have connected with you, come on your podcast, because they're quite well known.
Well, I've only had one well-known person on the musical podcast. Um, well, he might not be well-known, but the band certainly is. Because he's only 10 years older than me. That's scary. Um, but last year I had the surprising it was very surprising when he actually replied himself. I thought it was managed by someone. I thought it was managed by uh like every single star is managed by someone else or a team of people, and it would not actually get through to the actual person I want to speak to. But no, he made his own social media. I reached out to him on Facebook. Ironically, Mike Truscott, current drummer for Wishbone Ash. Um, I guess you can say progressive rock band. I'm not entirely sure what they are. Um, and that
And
was
then
that was the only really famous person.
in terms of your company, what connections have you made there?
I've had people I'm completely unknown people, just my general connections on LinkedIn on the show. Most have been in the education sector as well, ranting and raving about why on earth that system is broken. And the I've had no regular my general connections, and then recently well, not recently, 1 year ago I had not many people outside the US will probably know him, but I had Blaine Bartlett on my podcast at one point during the time, and he's become a very close friend.
Oh, nice. Well, one thing I noticed as I went through and I began researching you is that you are making waves in this area. You're
Yeah.
making waves as a musician, and you're making waves as someone on the neurodivergent spectrum who is saying, we need to think outside the box. We've got talented human beings here that are being written off and not given time to showcase their talents. And of course, I've watched a few of your episodes, and the guy that I'm like, I want to talk to him. I don't remember his name. I'm terrible with names, but he was a burnout specialist. He's a burnout specialist. And I'm like, I've got to talk to him at some point. So you're getting people from all walks of life that are wanting to just kind of support you on your journey. And I think that's really cool.
Um, yeah, I would really love, because I know for a fact he is dyslexic. I would love Richard Branson. Oh, sorry, Sir Richard Branson. I still have respect for him. He's not giving me any reason not to respect him yet. So I'm plenty
So,
have, but
so that's your top interview you would like to do is Sir Richard Branson.
yeah, I mean he's dyslexic and he does stuff for a lot of neurodiverse communities as well.
Okay, well, we're putting it out there. If anybody
Yeah,
knows Sir
he's
Richard
very
Branson,
he's very difficult to get hold of. Very difficult, as you can imagine.
oh, I can. I'm right there with you.
That is kind of what I was going to be expecting the challenge to be uh when I contacted the Wishbone Ash drummer. I was expecting that kind of level of lack of response, so to speak.
Yes, well, I understand because I contact everyone who's if I use an article or something for part of my research, or if I use a song or I reference something, I always contact the people or attempt to. And I will say, I'm sorry, there's, of course, sirens going off in the background. I
I can't hear
apologize.
it. No,
Um, I'm glad you can't hear it. It's super loud here. Um, but I would say I probably get 5% of those people ever respond to me at all. And when they do, I'm always shocked.
yeah, especially when they do it themselves as opposed to their team. Um, so I want to help you find that person. So it shouldn't be that difficult to narrow down because I've only done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There were two guys on the podcast. After we're done,
Seven
I
male. I've
will,
done 7 podcasts with males. There we go.
yeah. After we're
One.
done talking, I will tell you which one it was.
I want to change. I want to change that because we got one female. That's pathetic. Um, I want to change that.
Well,
Um,
in the world of neurodivergence, females are known for masking, so they're a
I
little
was, I was
harder to,
masking. I was a masking pro.
yeah.
I had no choice. Um,
Does it feel good to be on this side of things now?
yes, but I wish it came earlier. I wish I didn't really give to. I wish I really didn't care when I was about 10 or 12 years younger, in my 20s, and then I had this idea back then, and then yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. What are your recommendations for educators, and actually it could be anyone listening, on how we can help accomplish your goal to foster creativity in the workplaces, schools, how we can encourage individuals to not have to mask and promote a culture where creative minds can thrive?
Now, I would say completely ignore the rule book, but then you get fired.
Mm-hmm.
But if anyone has watched, and if anyone hasn't watched School of Rock, what the heck is the matter with you? Um,
Great movie.
but yes, exactly, and even more great play. Um, Great musical, sorry. But for those of you who haven't watched School of Rock, A, I strongly recommend you do, and B, I believe that Jack Black was on the right path.
All right. I mean, honestly, there's many great things you can take away from Jack Black in that performance.
Yeah.
He,
Apart from the blatant um identity theft,
yes. Well, nobody's perfect.
apart from that, if he's done it the right way, by not doing that, but by just literally going there and proving to everyone that if you are genuinely care about people, you are not a criminal. Um, so
Yeah.
you don't need all this background check malarkey. Um, I understand why nowadays it's necessary. Doesn't mean I agree with it. But
Yes.
he had the right idea. Went into the school, ripped up the rule book, and actually went down to kids levels and discovered their passion and what they mean. He actually found out what they liked to do.
He did, and it brought out the best in all of them.
When you go down to the kids level, you would eventually be bringing them up to your level, but you don't want to bring them up to your level when they're kids here. They are not adults, and they need to be understood as such. So why do we waste 13 years in the UK? I don't know what it's like in the US, but 13 years in the UK, trying to bring the students up to our level.
Yes.
It's like having a war with a brick wall, especially the teenagers. Can't argue with them. You can't reason with teenagers on what teachers call their level. But you can have a conversation with anyone if you go down to the level of a person.
That's a really different way of looking at education. And I honestly, I've never thought of it that way. How we are expecting the students to rise to what we what we understand rather than
and the role model which you tend to produce and which do get which let's be honest here. No teacher, no human. If someone actually on this podcast finds anyone who is completely perfect, um, in every way, then I challenge them to actually prove me wrong and put them in the comments. But no one is perfect, and if you bring them up to your level, you're basically not really bring them up to your level because if you're an adult and you're still acting like a kid, so stealing all that stuff and all the bad stuff and your student sees what you do and then they copy you because that they see that as your level. Congratulations, you have started you not you personally, but you have started their career as a juvenile.
yeah, well, I think I can think of some instances where we saw this happen with students, not necessarily, they went on a path of crime, but if they had a teacher who was not very nurturing, those
Yep.
classrooms by the end of the year would not be a very nurturing community to one another. Where if somebody fell at recess, nobody cared, nobody went over to help them. Whereas if it was a nurturing environment, if the teacher was nurturing, you would see more of that compassion from the students. So you are 100% onto something there.
Best advice I can give teachers, which doesn't actually break the rules at all in the slightest. If you want to keep your job, if you want students to come to your level, treat the situation like as if you're adopting a stray animal for the first time. When they first come into the classroom and notice a whole bunch of students and a whole bunch of new people, they're not going to be very warm or wanting to come up to you and say hello. And if they are, some of them are, yeah. But uh, and introduce themselves and their entire life history. No, like much like a dog or any animal really that's being adopted by a new family, having lived in the pound um for a while, would likely to retreat and be more reluctant to come to school, let alone learn anything, if we are too not heavy-handed. That's heavy, yeah. Well, it's sort of similar um to the environment. So what I did with an example, my dog is yeah, I brought him home. I did not look at him. I did look at him, but I didn't look at him I didn't stare at him, and then I turned away. He came to me. You want your students to come to you,
Right.
and if you continue to effectively chase them, you aren't going to get anywhere. You're going to get resentment, and then they will start acting out.
I can tell you any behavior issues that I have seen almost always come down to a power struggle,
Yep.
where somebody feels like their power's being taken away. So, well, I like to end my podcast by asking my guests to share a funny moment in their teaching experience. And I think you have one. So, will you share it for us?
In teacher experience, not really a funny in teacher experience sort of thing, but as a student, I was on first name terms with all my teachers, particularly the strict ones who really, yeah, who really put fear into the other people that who I actually literally greeted like an old friend from the first time I stepped foot in the classroom. um, but the if well, I don't teach these two anymore, sadly, because they stopped their lessons for some reason. I didn't even want to push. Um, they were brother and sister, so they always wanted to better each other. I then pulled them up on it, and I said, "Why are you trying to better each other? At the end of the day, the only person you should be bettering is the person you were before. You shouldn't be bettering someone else. It's impossible. I can't be Steve Jobs for several reasons. I'm young, I've got long hair, I have got glasses, I haven't got a beard, I didn't own Apple, and I'm not dead."
All true. Yes.
So it's also a waste of energy. Um, if you try and go into competition with someone else, because you ain't ever going to win. You're in fact going to make yourself a worse version of yourself that you were, yeah, they were the day before. If you constantly wish you weren't yourself, if you weren't wish you weren't the person you are.
Yeah. There's a saying, I don't know who said it, but it is comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that's very true.
So
So
yeah, rip up
is
the
there
rule,
anything? Go ahead.
rip up the rule book in a rip up the rule book, but do it right and for the right reasons. Go down to the students level and find out what interests them. For example, if it's money, if it's buying stuff, then you make a math lesson all about, okay, this item that you want costs this amount, and give them and use their interests as a sort of a way to get through to them.
Yep. I I think you've given us some really valuable insight. You are my first person from the neurodivergent community to come on and do the podcast, and I hope not my last one. I have had a lot of special education teachers come on the podcast, though, and I think that this is something that needs to change probably in the world. Nobody comes out of the womb knowing everything. And oftentimes, at least in the US, people are so afraid to ask for help. And I feel like teachers need to be helping each other and sharing their experiences. And you coming on here and sharing your experience as a student in that setting can do nothing but help us all be better teachers and better people who deal with all populations. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we end today?
One other piece of advice I would give to teachers and experts, um, particularly around special needs, we are not all the same. Don't treat us like we are. And if you want to find out what different things we need and not give us a whole package which some of us actually don't need, then speak to us.
I love that. And it needs to be said a lot.
And you're not an expert until you actually understand what until you understand that.
For sure. I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time to come on the podcast. And I'm going to repeat again, all the links to things that we talked about, we will put in the show notes.
Thank you for having me.
I wish I knew.
Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is by Otis McDonald featuring Joni Inez. If you know someone who might enjoy these conversations, please share the podcast episodes as much and as often as you can. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access today's episode and sending it in a message or sharing it on social media. I'm a small, independent operation, and your shares broaden our audience. Perhaps you or someone you know will be inspired to talk about teacher burnout. If you would like to get your voice on my podcast, contact me via the link on my webpage, taught.buzzsprout.com. Coach, speaker, and author Rashid Ogunlaru said, "It may take many voices for people to hear the same message." Join me in being one of the many voices rising up to get the message out around educator burnout. This is Melissa LaFleur. Thank you for listening to Taught, the podcast.
I wish I knew.